So let's get right into it. Deep in Venezuela, there's a place called the Orinoco Belt, and it holds one of the biggest, absolutely massive deposits of oil anywhere on the planet. We're talking about a mind-boggling amount of energy just sitting there locked away under the ground.
But here's the thing, and it's a huge paradox. Even with all that oil, the world's biggest companies aren't exactly knocking down the door to get to it. So that brings us to the big question we're tackling today. Why on earth does nobody seem to want the world's largest oil reserve? And just to give you a sense of scale here, the estimates for the Orinoco Belt are staggering. We're talking about 1.2 trillion barrels of oil. To put that in perspective, that's almost 5 times the proven reserves of the entire United States. So, what's the catch?
Well, to start untangling this mystery, the first clue is the oil itself. It turns out the very physics of this stuff, it's just incredibly difficult to work with. You see, it's really important to get this one thing straight. Not all oil is created equal. A barrel of oil isn't just a barrel of oil. Its chemistry, what you can make with it, and how much it's worth all changes dramatically depending on where in the world you find it. And the oil in the Orinoco Belt? It's not that liquid black gold you're probably picturing. Nope, it's classified as extra heavy crude. And what that really means is, it's a thick, gooey substance that's a lot more like tar or even molasses than the oil that eventually becomes gasoline for your car. And you can really see the difference side by side. You've got light oil, like what you'd find in Texas or Saudi Arabia, which flows super easily. A lot of the time, you just drill a hole and natural pressure pushes it right out. But extra heavy crude is the polar opposite. It's a real pain to extract and, as we're about to see, it gives you much less valuable stuff in the end. You know, I love this quote from chemical engineering professor Eric Muller because it paints such a perfect picture. He says if you put this stuff in a beaker and turn it upside down, nothing happens. It looks like tar. It's basically a solid at room temperature. So how in the world do you get something that thick out of the ground? You can't just pump it, that's for sure. Instead, companies have to use these really expensive and complicated methods, like blasting high-pressure steam underground to heat it up, or mixing in lighter chemicals like naphtha just to thin it out. All of this adds a ton of cost and complexity before you've even gotten a single drop to the surface. Okay, so that brings us to the second piece of the puzzle. The fact that this oil is so physically difficult doesn't just make it expensive to get, it also makes it less valuable and, frankly, terrible for the environment once you actually have it. This chart right here is everything. A lot of people don't realize this, but you get totally different products from different types of oil. A barrel of light crude from, say, Saudi Arabia refines into a lot of high-value gasoline and jet fuel. That's the good stuff. But a barrel of Venezuelan crude, you're mostly getting low-value products like asphalt for paving roads and heavy bunker fuel for big ships. And then there's the environmental side of it. Because of all that extra work, the steaming, the mixing, the really complex refining, the whole process of turning Venezuelan crude into something useful pumps out more CO2 than almost any other oil on the market. I mean, look at this. It's right at the top of the emission scale. Oil emissions researcher Deborah Gordon just nails it with this summary. She says Venezuela's oil is basically the worst of both worlds. You're creating the most pollution to produce a barrel of oil that you have to sell for the lowest price. From any angle, business or climate, that's just a terrible deal. And believe it or not, the problem gets even worse. Venezuela's oil infrastructure is just falling apart. We're talking leaky pipelines, abandoned wells, broken flares, and all of that is releasing massive amounts of methane. That's a greenhouse gas that's over 80 times more powerful than CO2 at warming the planet in the short term. So we've got tough physics and terrible economics. But there's a third and final piece to this puzzle that might just be the biggest roadblock of all. A long, messy history of political risk. So check this out. International oil companies have basically been burned in Venezuela not once, but twice. The industry was nationalized in 1976. Then, after Hugo Chavez was elected, it happened all over again. He pushed out foreign companies and workers, which caused this massive expertise drain. All the people who actually knew how to run these complicated operations left, and the whole system just collapsed. This quote from a former oil executive, Luis Pacheco, really puts it into perspective. He compares it to a marriage. Think about it. Developing these oil fields takes billions of dollars and a commitment of decades. So for any company, the question is, if I get into this long-term marriage, can I trust that I won't just get kicked out in 10 years and lose everything? And history, well, it suggests the answer is probably no. All right, so when you put all these pieces together, the physics, the economics, the politics, you start to get a very clear picture. Venezuela's oil is simply one of the world's most difficult and unattractive assets. And there you have it. The paradox is solved. The world's largest oil deposit is basically worthless because of this perfect form of problems. The physics make it crazy expensive to get out of the ground. The value is super low, giving you cheap stuff like asphalt. The environmental cost is the highest in the world. And the political history makes any sane investor run for the hills. And that leaves us with one last really big question to think about. Even if we had some magical new technology to solve all the extraction problems, it would still take a decade and billions of dollars just to get the industry running again. In a world that's actively trying to move away from fossil fuels, is it possible that by the time they get it working, nobody will even want this difficult, dirty, and expensive oil anymore? It's a real possibility that its time may have already passed.